Cig Harvey is a photographer, artist, and writer. She's known for her richly saturated color photographs and poetic reflections on nature, emotion, and the everyday. Her work blends large format photography and lyrical writing to explore what it means to feel deeply and vividly. Her books and images are held in major collections, including the Met, the Library of Congress, and the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Sig Harvey has exhibited internationally and received numerous accolades, including the Prix Virginia Laureate and the Maine in America Award. In this book edition episode of The Crit House, Sig Harvey joins us to talk about her stunning new book, Emerald Drifters. Sig Harvey, welcome back to the Crit House. It's nice to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Okay, so I'm gonna start off with a compliment, because of all the people I've talked to on this program, you always have the best color scheme, and it's just on point, just lovely.
Thank you. I just wrote a book about color, so I have to. I do consider these things for sure.
Well, and that's what we're here to talk about, your new book about color. But it's not just about color. I mean, that's a big part of it. You talk about color theory and the like, but it's about aging. It's about so much. So tell us about this lovely new book of yours.
So Emerald Drifters uses color, all the text in Emerald Drifters, and I think there is perhaps 32 vignettes in the book, written vignettes, varying in length. They all address color in the way humans since the beginning of time have interacted with color. Sometimes it's personal stories, sometimes it's something historical, sometimes it's something mathematical, something from physics. So it's all different ways that humans have interacted with color and the importance of color in our lives. But the photographs and really the text are about living and dying, the mortality, the idea of mortality being the central theme in my work. So color, like the flowers in Blue Violet, my previous book before, is just sort of an access point to talk about sort of the larger themes of what it is to be human.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just from a design standpoint, going through, I have not seen the physical copy of your book yet, but I saw the PDF and kind of going,
I'm
I know.
going to send you one right now. I didn't realize that, because that is important. It isn't meant to be viewed on the screen. It really is supposed to be smelt, you know.
And I get that, but what I experienced in looking through the book, at least on my little screen here, was that sensation of going through. It was almost, this isn't right, but it's you're going from color to color to color, like you're on a trip in through, you know, all of the different colors that you can experience in your work, and that I hadn't seen before. I just thought it was just a lovely experience reading the book.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for ways to play, to add surprise, to shake it up, to grab the reader by the shoulder. So definitely this journey of color and taking that sort of meandering. Sometimes it's very fast, sometimes it's a slow pace, but taking that journey through color was a real intention of mine.
Part of what we're trying to do with this program, the book edition on the Crit House, is to talk about the process of coming up with the book and what you went through to get to publication. So I guess the first question is what you started with what you ended up with? Like, did you know that the book was going to be what it is? Like, what was your initial concept?
Oh, where to start? We could talk for an hour just on this idea, because it's something you've really sort of tapped into the pulse of what I think about. If you only make the thing that you know you can make at the beginning, then you're missing out on the entire creative process, because creativity is such a gift and such a this tapping into true creativity. It starts making itself, and we're just sort of running to catch up with it in many ways. You know, some people call it the flow, some people call it dropping into the muse. People have different names for it, but when you are in you can't photographic projects, you can't think them up beforehand. You might have an idea, but if you
Yeah.
only make that thing, you know, then your world will get smaller. And there's this beautiful thing when you sort of you open yourself up to the creative process in photograph in projects, but also in the making of the book, that it's the act of making it, you discover all these wonderful things. So, you know, it wasn't my first book I have made, and in many ways, design wise, it is the sister book to Blue Violets, the one
Right.
that came before. So, you know, there were things that we started off with, but I definitely didn't set up, you know what it was going to end at the end. And thank goodness, because I could never have imagined that it would, you know, something as simple as and complicated as the ombre type, where all the text in the book moves from a dark to a medium green throughout the lines. Sometimes it goes horizontal, sometimes it's vertical and feels like a waterfall. And it's very subtle. Some people don't realize that it's happening. Some people don't realize that it's green type, not black, and all these subtleties. And that came about with the whole idea of drifting and emerald, and the creative process sort of leads you to decisions that you could never have made at the beginning.
Yeah, that's well, because you started working on the book while you were still creating images. I mean, you didn't start with a body of work and say, here's the what I'm going to make for the book. You were creating while you were making, right?
Yeah, so this is typically the way I work. I'm making the next book right now. And so what I'm doing is I'm photographing. I'm photographing every day. I'm responding to the world. Sometimes I'm going out with a plan to make that type of picture, meet this person there. And then other times I am just out picking up my daughter from school or from hockey practice, and I've just got my camera with me and I'm responding to the world. When I see the light does something, anything that I notice that is a surprise or something that needs to be remembered. So there's that way of working very intuitively, just responding. And I take those pictures and I upload them and I sort of do my starring process, and then I put them in a bucket. And then I go about my day and do the same thing. And I put them in a bucket. I go about my day, put them in a bucket. Every morning I write, not really thinking too much of what writing to something specific. And then after about a year or two, and I didn't plan that time, that's just what I've seen happen. I then start gathering, well, what are my favorite images here out of this group in this bucket that I'm interested in? How do they connect to each other? What's the thread between them? All these scraps of writing, all these vignettes, what are they all about? And it turned out with Emerald Drifters, they were all about color in some way. So then what I'll do is then, formalize it more and say, okay, the text about this book in this book is going to be about color. The photographs are going to be of flowers or of cakes, or for example, fill in the blank. And so then it's the intuitive process leads the way. And then I sort of respond and listen to it and then sort of formalize it. So use that as parameters and, parentheses in many ways. And so at that point, then the book starts to take shape. I'll start talking with Jeanette, who I work with. She's my book designer. But really the book itself, text and image, is almost finished when I give it to her in
Oh,
terms
that's
of
interesting.
text and image, not sequence, not design, not any of that, but text and image itself, the vast majority is there. And then she has enough then to say, okay, this is what we have here. Let's think about how we can take the form of this book and match it to the content. And I'll keep making, and but perhaps I'll add in over that course of the 6-month design process, maybe I'll add in 3, 4, 5, 6 pictures, but the
Okay.
bulk of the work is done.
So that was
Was
going
that
to
was
be
that
my
helpful, or did I go on too
oh
much with that?
no, 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 that's perfect. So
Okay.
but that because that's the thing that I am fascinated with right now, because I've done, I did my own little book, and the most important thing for me was when I brought in a friend of mine to help with the design and sequence
Yeah.
and essentially be the designer. And she brought things to the book to my work that I never would have seen and I never would have thought of. What I'm sort of interested in, one of the things I'm very interested in is the process of working with designers to help make the book become what it can be and your work to become what it can be. Because we as photographers, we have a certain set of skills, and others, designers and other people who work in the publishing industry, have an understanding of what books can be and how people interact with books. Can you talk about how you work with your team and the people on your to bring the final product and what they bring to it?
I mean, it's so important to have that second, third, fourth set of eyes on the work because, making projects and writing and photographing, it's a very inward process, isn't it? We're sort of working
Yeah.
alone oftentimes, perhaps getting a little feedback here and there, but it's a solitary walk in many ways. And that's absolutely wonderful. And for it to be truly authentic, you need to tap into that, who you are and how you want to be vulnerable with this work. But then there's such an important moment when it comes to sharing the work. So I'll often work with a couple of people before it even goes to the designer, and we'll talk about a sequence and an edit. For Emerald Drifters, I worked with Madeleine Morlaix, who was wonderful, very good friend of mine. I trust her implicitly to talk about sequence and edit. And then I'll often do table reads with good reader friends, and we read the entire book out loud 3 or 4 times, and think about, well, is that landing right? Am I being clear with what I mean there? Just talking it through. And that to me has been super valuable to do these table reads. And then the pictures, starting moving things around, that's a very sort of digital process initially. Then it get printed out on the floor, moving things around, taking some time away from it, coming back with fresh eyes. So it's that whole discussion. It's very outward in many ways. It's the opposite of the making of the work. And then taking that initial package and taking it to Jeanette, the designer, and saying, here you go. In both cases that I worked with her, the sequence and edit was pretty much in place when I gave it to her. Things shifted slightly, but I really enjoy that part of the process, and I
Yeah.
enjoy taking ownership with that. I wouldn't like to just give my pictures away and say, well, what have you got for me? I know some people do work that way. It's just not right for me. And then Jeanette will, she'll be in touch every couple of weeks. A couple of times a week, and then sometimes every day. It depends. And then we'll take a little break for a minute and sort of step aside and then come back to it with fresh eyes after a vacation or a holiday. And Jeanette will have put together different ways to deal with the type with this book, different set of sequencing. We knew we wanted to do full bleed. There were some considerations we had already decided right at the beginning, but there were so many different options. At one point, the type in this book was bronze, and then we really fell in love with the ombre. Every line in the book, as I mentioned, is ombre. We really loved that idea. And what would be the cover, and what would be the inside sequence, and the way how would we handle the titles? So there was so many considerations to still be made, but the initial sequence and edit is typically done by me and whoever I'm working with. In this case, it was Madeleine.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by the idea of the table read. I hadn't heard of that before for a book. What is that like? I mean, and so tell me about that. How many people are around the table, and are you editing as you go along? Are people
Yeah.
responding? Yeah.
It's interesting because my dear friend Ariel Greenberg, she's my writing coach, I would say. And when I suggested to her the first time, this is my previous book with Blue Violet, that we do a table read, she was like, I've never done one of those before. And she's an author. She's maybe had 10, 12 books out. And so I don't think it's normal, but it's something that I had learned from the MFA program at Maine Media, and with the screenwriters, sometimes for their thesis defense, they do table reads. And it's really interesting the way you think something is landing when it's in your own head, but when you say it out loud, it's quite different. So I don't know if other people do a table read, but typically it's just back and forth. We'll take it in turns. I'll read a vignette, then you'll read a vignette. Yeah, I'll read a vignette and then we'll just go back and forth. Sometimes it's more useful if I'm reading it. Other times it's good for me to hear it, and we are editing all the way through it. And then if we get to a confusing paragraph, we'll really break it down and read it, sentence by sentence. Otherwise, we'll just sort of let it flow.
Yeah, I was just thinking it must be really helpful for you to hear it in somebody
Yeah,
else's voice. You know, even the way that somebody would read something is an interpretation of what you've written.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I think when you say it out loud too, sometimes there's this moment where you actually, what are you trying to say there? There's a questioning that can happen that happens sort
Yeah.
of intuitively. So it's very useful. And also when people laugh out loud because of something that I've written that's funny, that's wonderful. Or I laugh when I'm reading it out loud, which is really wonderful because I've read it so many times. And if it still makes me chuckle, then I'm onto a good thing. I've tapped into the muse, you know?
You mentioned before that you write every day. When you write,
Hmm.
do you write with the idea that this is going to be in your book, or are you just writing for, are you journaling, or what's the purpose of the writing when you're like, what do you think of that?
So initially, when I first started working this way 20 something years ago, I wrote just as a way to sort of make more pictures, really kind of clear out all the stuff and to make more pictures. And then with my first book, which was published, You Look at Me Like an Emergency in 2010, that has text and image. All of my books have text and image. I've worked this way, my entire career. But initially I started writing purely as a generative form, right? It wasn't there to actually be alongside the pictures. It was just as a way to make more work, to get out my ideas, to articulate, to give voice my ideas. So then I would be able to speak about my work in a way that felt coherent. And then I realized that the words were doing something different than the photographs, that they were bringing another level to the work. So I committed very early on to showing the two together. Now, some mornings I write just, moan or whatever, do, or, respond to how I'm feeling, joyful, tired, all the things that we run, the gamut of emotions we go through every day. And then typically there's something there that I heard yesterday, or I saw this morning, or I'm feeling something that, oh, that gut instinct in me says this. It sort of underscores it and or highlights it in yellow. And then I'll take that thing and then write to that. So tomorrow morning, for example, my daughter, this is a great example. My daughter was telling me a story about one of her friends who's just started waitressing. She's 14 at the local, I think the local sports center. Anyway, she said that someone had returned a salad because it was overwhelmingly too green. And I thought that was like hilarious. I mean, just so funny. So I'm going to write to that tomorrow. Like, what does that mean that something is overwhelmingly too green? So sometimes it's things like that, just things that sit with me that either make me chuckle or make me pause or make me sad, and I'll write to that in the morning or the next day. So it is a mix, but writing is all about, it's very different than photography in many ways in terms of process, because writing is all about rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and realizing that the rewriting is an act of creativity. You know, it's not a line edit at that point. It's still, you're
Yeah.
very much creating. So it's quite different than the making of the pictures.
So I'm going to ask you a question that if you can choose not to answer, which is perfectly
Oh,
fine, because you mentioned, well, because you mentioned you're working on the next book now, right?
right.
So in the phase of that process, where are you and what are you doing on your next project? And how are
Yeah.
you thinking of it?
I mean, I am at the like each stage is the best and the worst I've learned. It's
It's
the
like
best
kids,
when
right?
it's so true. It's like the best when the book is finished because it's this, this glorious object. And I remember when Emerald Drifters was just coming out, and I'd spent 4 years making the work and, writing and taking pictures, and then, 6 months editing and sequence, and then 6 months in design, and then 6 months with getting the proofs back from the printer, and, being a squeaky wheel and saying, no, it's 5 points more, contrast and 1 point less magenta on this, and then, oh, we're going to have the shipping thing is going to get damaged in shipping. And so this constant worry, right, of
Yeah.
every step of the way is the best and the worst. And then it comes to the time where, then it's shipping the books out. And I shipped out almost 1,000 books on my own with the help of
Oof.
Katya, my assistant. And it was crazy the amount of work. And so I was concerned about that. And then it got to the point where 2 days later, somebody emailed me and said, I loved the book. I read it all. oh my God, you're crazy, or something like that. And it suddenly occurred to me, I'm like, oh no, people are going to read the actual book. I'd never considered it. All these like my innermost, because I really, lay myself wide open and, make my, turn myself inside out for this work. So I think that, each step is the best and the worst. And right now I'm at the beginning stage of a brand new book that will probably be 3 or 4 years worth of work, because that's
Hmm.
typically how it works. And part of me thinks it's the worst stage because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just gathering. And then the other part of me thinks it's the best stage because it can be anything.
Right.
And I'm not pinned down to anything. The work can be about the world is my oyster. So in many ways, it's a really exciting, pregnant stage because I don't know yet. I don't know what the new work is about. And that's very exciting.
Are there images that right now you
Yeah,
are holding on to, or you are particularly excited about, that you think may end up in that body of work?
100%. And every morning I've been looking at them like this. Like, there's a couple, there's probably 15 so far. I mean, I've obviously made a lot more because if you think about it, Blue Violet's been out now, what, 4 months, and it was a year in the design process. So
Right.
maybe there's 20, but yes, yes.
Yeah.
But I'm reluctant to say, with Blue Violet, it was using flowers as a metaphor. With Emerald Drifters, it was color. I don't know what the thing is that I will use as an
Right.
access point.
Well, so that's why I said you cannot answer this question because you don't
Right,
know, right? And so
right.
so there was part of me that was sort of saying, okay, she's here now. I wonder what she's thinking of it. And then let's come back in 4 years and see where you went from what you just said
Yeah.
to where it ended up. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't answer it. I mean, I'm a wide open book, so I just don't, I literally
You just
don't
don't know.
know yet,
Yeah.
and it will be before 4 years because it will become clear probably in the next year, 6 months.
Well, I'm looking forward to that.
So in Emerald Drifters, there are, in addition to the photographs and the writing, there's, I think it's 85 photographs, 32 written vignettes. There are 7 or 8 watercolors. And I choose to use watercolors, the medium, when I didn't have my camera with me, which is very rare that I don't have my camera with me. But there are a couple of occasions, like one when my mother was in the ICU. And so I didn't photograph then. But afterwards, I wanted to remember that experience in color. And so I did these color swatches. And the day that my dog passed, I did these color swatches. So for me, it was sort of a way when I haven't had or have chosen to put down the camera, this was a way to access that time visually. And I've always worked in that way somewhat. With Blue Violet, I explored the world of infographics and used humor and used history to sort of talk about I'm interested in how we can present information or present ideas in a way that isn't expected. And so I use the form of the book, which people, this is what Ocean Wong talks about. Books are ancient. As a culture, we know how to use them.
Hmm.
And that's an extraordinary thing. It's such a simple thing to say, but it's actually a really wonderful thing to say. So if you then can break that form or bring in elements of surprise in how to use a book, that's something that I'm really interested in. So I try and mix up how I present ideas and thoughts. And so that's why there's this sort of integration of text, image, and painting or drawing, I suppose.
There's also, if I remember correctly, there's also some fairly in-depth discussions about, I don't know if it's color theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's so, which for me, who is entirely black and white. I mean, 99.9% of what I create is black and white. That's a fascinating thing for me to think about. I mean, talk a little bit about how color theory, or what you put into the book in regards to that, is important to you.
Yeah, I think that's as our roles as artists, it's a wonderful sort of pressure or a part of the role where your job is to do the research, and so I love doing the research around these ideas. And so when it came to me writing a book on color, of course, I had to read and really take in exactly what was happening in our bodies when how we perceive color, because light is real, color is a
Hmm.
perception. So,
Right.
figuring out what is the physics, what is the biology, what is happening when we see something, what is happening, how is my experience of red different than yours experience of red? And I love that research part of my work. I think often as photographers, there's this quest to find more information. And that's as a role, whether you're a writer doing the research for your characters. I think of it as the same thing for the way I pull my books together. Doing the research for Blue Violet involved reading maybe 30 or 40 textbooks on flowers, what's happening with flowers, the language of flowers. And for Emerald Drifters, I have an entire section of my library at home is all about color theory.
So in the process of doing that research for Emerald Drifters on
Yeah,
color theory,
yeah.
did anything that you learned in that process either change your photography or change the book? I mean, what did you take away from that you didn't know before you did your research?
Oh, well, you only know what you know. I mean, I learned so much. Having that time to do a deep dive into something that we take for granted, the way we see in
Hmm.
color, and exploring how really since the beginning of time, color has been a source of great complexity. It's still unclear. We actually know very little about how the brain works, right? So, for me, all the research, I read and read and read, and then I highlight anything that surprises me or anything where I'm like, oh, that or what? This idea, I do all the quizzes of when, you stare at a piece of red cake and then look at a white wall and see that image projected in
Right,
green
right.
on the wall, and what is happening in the body. So on a scientific level, and then breaking that down into a more personal experience. I hadn't really thought about how, since the perception of color, of how color is seen as bright colors are seen as garish or childish or not serious. I had not I had not read enough about beauty and color, and how, the colors in Scandinavia are seen as more elevated, more sophisticated, just sort of this inherent bias or prejudice around color, that until I really had done this deep research, things that we had, systemically believed in. And, for me, then it's an opportunity to question what's going on.
So I'll try to ask it again because that's fascinating about all of those things because I don't understand, like I haven't not done that research.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything in your own work that you feel like is either different or informed differently from before to where you are right now based on what you learned in that research?
Yes. I mean, for example, I know why the image of the three apricots on the wet on the blue tablecloth is so haunting. I know that why. And it's because of color theory. We often take our experiences with color and put it down to I just like that or I don't like that. But there's something that's happening in your body that's giving you that reaction. So having a greater understanding of what is happening and the science behind it, and how, it is a scientific fact that color affects the body. I love knowing, well, why is that?
Yeah,
What is
yeah.
happening?
Well, that's interesting about that image. So, do you think is it that you understand that image differently, or would you have taken that image and liked it and appreciated it, but now you understand it differently? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Or I
Yeah.
understand, I would have made the image anyway, but now I understand the reason why
Yeah.
it's so strong. It's because those two colors next to each other vibrate off each other at a different frequency. And it's sort of reading Joseph Albers, the
Yeah.
interaction of color, how one color next to another influences. So
Yeah.
it was one thing, I had never taken a color theory class, and but I had worked in color and was obsessed with color all my life. But it was only reading those books came to understand what is actually happening when you start putting, these colors in this temperature of light. why does that work in Mexico City as opposed to working in Amsterdam, where the light temperature is completely different? So that part of the research, it gives answers to the way I've just intuitively worked all my
Yeah.
life.
So that's actually really, it's a good statement of how you, author, benefit from and become a better author, photographer in the process of putting out the book because of what you learned from that. So you're taking, because you've created this book, the next book you have coming out will be more informed because of it. And
Yeah.
my elementary understanding of art and books is that you put everything into it and then you put it out, and that's sort of the sum total of it. But it's a process.
Yeah, exactly. And it
Yeah.
is a process that is wonderful. What a way to live.
Yeah.
That it's this
Yeah.
constant sense of discovery. It's a sort of intellectual process in the research, but
Yeah.
then out in the field, you see it in real life, and you're like, I know why I'm perceiving this tree right now with those red apples in such a way. And so
Yeah.
it's sort of, you're seeing it in real life happening out in front of you, and to understand the world more because of the research that you did. But I was making the pictures anyway. I want to sort of state that it's not like I'm going out to prove a theory. It's just having the gift of knowledge is a wonderful thing. I love learning.
One of the other things I enjoy talking to you about is you seem to have such great joy and appreciation for it. I mean, you said it, I think you said luck. We're so lucky.
Yeah.
You are an artist making your living creating, and
Yeah,
what a blessing to have that to be that person in this world.
exactly. I mean, what a beautiful thing. I mean, I think of my job as every day I need to somehow make note, whether that's through the camera or the pen, of something that I find strange and rare in the everyday. I'm not interested in sort of AI at all and making it up. I want to find it in the world. So, and that's not to knock any AI work, but for me, I want to experience in the world and to live more fully because of my work. Like, yes, it's lovely, the book that gets made or the portfolio that gets made at the end of it, but for me, it's the act of making it that is a
Yeah.
beautiful way to live.
So I have just one last question for you, and this isn't about your book. So the last question I'm asking people who participate in this is to recommend a book for our viewers that
Mhm.
they should read. Not one of yours, any book. It doesn't even have to be photography, but it's a photo
Okay.
show. So what book should our viewers know about that perhaps they don't?
I'm only allowed one.
Yes, you're only allowed one. I'll give you two if you
Really?
got two.
No, I'm going to break the rules. I need to have
Okay.
more than one. So immediately, well, a book that I recommend to every maker, whether you're any art form, it's called Art and Fear. Did we talk about this last time?
No, I don't think so.
Oh my God, it's a must. It's so essential reading for anyone who's creative because creativity is full of joys and lows, highs and lows, and
Yes.
self-doubt, and then surety. So it's about when you get stuck, what you can do. It's about sort of getting out of the way of yourself. It's about listening to criticism. It's
Right.
a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book. So I think that's a must. Ocean Vuong, who wrote for Emerald Drifters, wrote the essay for Emerald Drifters. He has just come out with his new novel called The Emperor of Gladness, and it's extraordinary. I think it's going to win the Pulitzer. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I would highly, it's a novel, but it's based a lot on autobiography
Mhm.
and events that actually occurred. It's an extraordinary novel. So I definitely would recommend that book.
Great. All
But
right.
I mean, I have just over here in my studio are thousands of books, photo
It's
books.
an
And
it's an
it's
unfair question. I know that. I'm sorry.
and so there's so many extraordinary photo books and art books, and I really consider living amongst these books is an integral part of my creative practice.
Sig Harvey, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us again on the Crit House.